Welcome to Committee of Adjustment. I'm just going to ask Vincent, we have one of our members who is here remotely, if you could just turn your camera on, and then we'll move forward on that. If you do have a cell phone, I'll ask you to turn the ringer off. And any member of the public with us this evening, if you have an interest in any particular application, it's important to fill out the sign-in sheet at the back of the room if you haven't already done so. Just locate the sheet that is relevant to the application you're interested in, and that way you'll be notified of any decisions and changes as a result of what happens here this evening. So I'm now required to read the following notice. So the notice of decisions for the applications we review this evening will only be forwarded to those who have either presented a written request for the decision or to those who have recorded their name and address on the forms provided at the back of the room. Furthermore, a formal request is necessary to be advised of a possible Ontario Land Tribunal hearing on these matters, and in order to be allowed to make a presentation to the Ontario Land Tribunal, otherwise known as the OLT. So if you are following us remotely this evening and you want to be notified of the decision or of any appeals that may result, then please send an email to our Secretary-Treasurer, Lindsay Stamen. And do we have that slide up? Okay, yeah. Her email address is lsthamann@cityofkingston.ca. And be sure to include your full name and address and the file number of the application. So now I'd like to share with you the 5-part format I'm going to be using as we navigate through the applications this evening. In the first part, I'll start by introducing the applications. So if you are the applicant and you're with us this evening, then please work your way up to the seat right over here to my right. And once I recognize you, I'm going to ask you to state your name and address for the record. If you have anything further you wish to add to the application, that would be your opportunity to do so, and I'll be sure to ask that. Then in step number 2, I'll invite members of the committee to ask questions of the applicant or staff. Then in step number 3, I'll open the public portion of the meeting. Now, it's during the public portion of the meeting, members of the public who wish to speak to an application can also come up to the podium, and they'll have an opportunity to state their name and address for the record and ask a question or make any comments in respect of an application. But if you are a member of the public, don't expect an immediate response to your question or your comment, because during the public portion of the meeting, we'll be physically recording the questions and comments. It's only after I close the public portion will the questions and comments be addressed by the applicant, their agent, or staff. And I'll be calling 3 times for public comments before I close the public portion of the meeting. In the 4th step, I'll give the applicant or their agent or a staff member an opportunity to address the public comments. And then in the 5th and final step, I'll turn the meeting back over to our committee. I'll ask somebody to make a motion. We will deliberate on the application and make an ultimate decision. And then we rinse and we repeat. I'll be using the same 5-step format for every application this evening. And that's about it in a nutshell. So at this point, I'd like to call on Ian, our clerk, to confirm quorum.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I can confirm we do indeed have quorum. Currently absent from the committee is Paul Babin, Blaine Fudge, Somnath Sinha, and Jordan Tekenos-Levy.
Great, thanks very much. So I'll now call the meeting to order at 6:35 p.m. Sorry, 5:35 p.m. Yes, 5:35 p.m. And I'll refer you to the agenda, committee members. So there have been 2 addendums to the agenda. So the first one has the effect of adding number 8F to the business item, which is a supplemental report with a revised recommendation for 880 Stephentown Lane. And it also adds the returning deferred item of number 7A for the same property. And there's also one other addendum we received with 2 pieces of correspondence. So I'm looking for a motion to to approve the agenda with the 2 addendums. So moved by Greg and seconded by Vincent. Thank you. Any discussion? No. So all in favor, raise your physical hand, and that is carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, now we need confirmation of the minutes and approval of the minutes from the September 19th meeting. Everybody's had a chance to review them. Okay, so can I have a motion to approve? So moved by Greg and seconded by Vincent. Any discussion? None, so all in favor, raise your physical hands, and that's unanimously carried. Thank you. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? And I see none. There are no delegations, and there are no requests for deferrals, but we have our first returning deferred item, which is for 880 Stephentown Lane. So Lindsay, can I have you read this into the record, please? Oh, James, are you going to read into the record? Sorry.
Through you, Mr. Chair, because of the application of the addendum, we're actually going to deal with the supplemental first.
Okay.
And then we'll go from there.
Yes, that's right. Okay.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. This is the return of 880 Stephentown Lane. It was deferred at the last meeting by committee to allow staff to work with the applicant and address some of the heritage considerations related to the archaeological condition that was proposed as a condition of approval. Excuse me. During that time, staff have talked with Heritage Services, visited the site, and spoken with the applicant. And we are proposing to amend the archaeological assessment condition and scope it to be just the area of disturbance associated with the new proposed detached accessory building. So that's the amendment that's before you tonight. So staff have found this to be an appropriate means forward by addressing the concerns of the constraints on the site, as well as the wish of the applicant to move forward while still meeting all of our requirements under provincial criteria for an archaeological assessment in an assessed composite archaeological area. So I'd be happy to answer any questions you have as committee as we move forward tonight.
Okay, thanks very much for that. And committee members, you have the documentation on that, okay? So at this point, I think before we go further, we need a motion to assent the changes to the presentation. Okay, so we're fine then to open it up. Okay, so we have are we the applicant here?
Yes.
Yeah, or Mr. Carquez. Okay, so I have you state your name and address for the record, please.
Steve Carquez, 880 Stephentown Lane.
Okay, and is there anything further you want to add to the application that we have before us?
Well, I have a few pictures of some disturbance to the area that was there. And as per our meeting of last month, what we agreed upon was to have somebody from the Heritage Committee come out to a site and do an assessment of the disturbance level that was occurred.
Okay.
That did not get fulfilled. Mr. Park and Jason Partridge had came out themselves. So I believe a full assessment was not fully accurate of what was done.
Okay.
I've offered to dig some test holes to, show them the extent of the disturbance level, and that was not needed as per I'm not an archaeologist and I'm not a part of the Heritage Society.
Okay. Okay. So what's your position then at this point? Is there
I phoned a couple different some people to do a test dig for me. 2 of them were provided from the city saying that they could be in for this field season. So I've contacted them. I have confirmation via email that it can't be done this field season. I've tried in the past to do it before. And unfortunately, I would like this to be alleviated so I can move forth with this project.
Okay, thanks very much. Okay, so committee members, do you have any questions for the applicant or staff? Yep.
Out and spoke with you. So did you feel after those conversations at all that progress was made towards, or are you still not happy with what was discussed, what they brought forward, what the addendum says? I mean, can you be just a little bit more specific about what issues? Because when someone says something like you didn't feel as though a full heritage assessment was done, I just kind of get the sense that maybe you feel as though that something was missing or that all the steps weren't followed to a T. Maybe just a little bit more elaboration on the discussions and what you feel the remaining issues really are. You did mention that the time that they wouldn't be able to come, I guess, this season to get it done. I believe you do want to get this done before winter comes, is that correct?
It was going before last winter, but yeah, this winter's now the timeline. I truly feel the decision was made before these two members from the city even left their office, to be completely honest with you. I've offered to show them firsthand the disturbance level and, what was actually made up of the composite underneath us, which was then denied. Based on my misleading information that I've got before down this road, I don't think it was a fair assessment, nor was it the right person to come out and assess as what was agreed upon last month.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, any other questions? No? Vincent, you have any questions? Okay. Okay, thanks very much for that. Okay, so I'll open we have an opportunity. Do you want to address that at this point?
Sure, thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. I am aware of the events that have unfolded around this application, specifically related to this recommendation, the deferral, and the work that happened between that deferral and now. Given the commitments that were made, Planning Services did reach out and have conversations with Heritage Services, and they felt that given the level of disturbance that would happen because of the new building proposed on site and its size, that it did not warrant the additional field visit, and that they were sticking to their recommendation to have the archaeological assessment as part of the condition of this approval. So Heritage Services took into consideration what Mr. Park communicated to them post-deferral, and it was their recommendation to continue forward with an assessment for this property, albeit a scoped one now, that would just look at the area of disturbance of the proposed garage. Our recommendation that's being put forward is the city's minimum of what we're going to accept as part of this application. It makes no warrant or representation of what a licensed archaeologist is going to accept and put forward as their work under their license through the province and the work that they would want to achieve on the property. So Mr. Carquez will have to still work with the archaeologist that he would hire if the recommendation is approved put forward by staff tonight to work on the scoping for his property. But the city is satisfied with the proposed recommendation for an archaeological assessment related to just the disturbed area.
Okay, and who were there at the meeting, on-site visit?
The on-site visit was just Mr. Park, the Director of Planning Services, and the file planner, Jason Partridge, so no person from Heritage Services attended the site. But they did not feel as though they needed to attend the site, given their recommendation.
And did Mr. Park or Mr. Partridge have a feeling, did they have a feeling of that they felt hopeful that the assessment wouldn't be required, or were they silent on that?
I can't speak for the hopes of either reviewer when they were on site, noting that both of them are not archaeologists, so they wouldn't have been able to assess it at that level to make a determination like an archaeologist would on whether one or was not required. But they did attend the site, they did talk to the applicant about it, and the takeaway from this all was that Heritage Service was okay with a scoped recommendation and not a full clearance of the site, which would typically be the recommendation for any application through the city, whether it's Committee of Adjustment or Planning Committee.
Sure. So, and just for my own personal interest, what's the difference between a scope recommendation and the next step?
That's a great question. So typically with archaeological assessment, what the ministry looks for when a development application is happening on a site, no matter what the size or scope of the site and or application is they look for full clearance of the site. So whether the site's 1 hectare or 10 hectares, the typical practice would be to clear the entire site. That way, any future disturbance that would happen, whether it's from something that is zone compliant or at a future application stage, an archaeological assessment wouldn't be required. So it's almost a one and done with the ministry. You have an application, you open up your site, you do the archaeological assessment, and then you're cleared for life. So the scoped recommendation would just pin it down to the exact location of the garage. So if a future owner of the property was looking to, say, put an additional accessory building or expand the existing dwelling, and the archaeological master plan wasn't cleared for the area in which they were proposing the addition, they would have to come back in for another archaeological assessment.
I see, okay. And you have any idea what the cost is, range of costs for the scope?
Last time I heard of a scope, so there's many different stages to an archaeological assessment. There's 4 actually. So 1 is a desktop exercise, 2 is a certain level of site review, which looks at incremental ground testing within a certain distance of specific items. 3 is a bit more intense, and then 4 is a full excavation. We typically see applications just roll forward with a stage 1, 2, which is the desktop exercise and some testing on the site to see if there are any hotspots for archaeological clearance. If some are identified, then you move on to a stage 3. And if a stage 3 identifies the need for a stage 4, then you move on to a stage 4. Typically for a 1, 2, I believe the initial cost, and Mr. Carquez will probably know more than I have if he's been speaking with specific applicants, but I believe it's around $5,000. $5,000.
5,000. And the scope falls outside of that? Or the stage 1 and 2 is the scope?
That's generally the stage 1 and 2 price that I've heard. Excuse me. And I believe the last time I had a conversation with an archaeological person about this would have been several years ago. So maybe 2 or 3 years ago, that was the price. I don't know if anything has changed since then.
And I guess my last question is, what's the area of the excavation? What's the area of consideration here?
Yeah, so if we look at the report, I believe the garage is 139 square meters, maybe just over, so about 140 square meters of proposed change on the site. It is a large garage, but it is a multi-purpose building for the use of the owners of the property. So 140 square meters would roughly translate to about 1,500 or 1,600 square feet. The site, I can stand corrected, but I believe it's an acre or 2. Is that correct?
33,000 square feet.
33,000 square feet, which I believe is,
Under an acre, okay.
yeah. So it's 33,000 square feet would be about 3,000 square meters. So it's a small portion of the property that is proposed for this building. It's unfortunate because the zoning bylaw is very strict in what can be put on the property. The restriction is 10% lot coverage, but I believe the variance is only for the 200 square meters.
Okay, good, thanks for that. And committee members, any other questions? I don't want to hog the floor here. No? So one other question then, I have another question for you, Mr. Carquez. So you said you had additional information that you don't feel was considered? Did I get that right?
As in,
Well, when you made the initial presentation, when you opened up, you felt that there were some more considerations, you had more information that they maybe had not considered.
well, for one, it was expressed to me from the start of this whole process, if I was to do a slab on grade,
Yep.
no archaeological assessment was required,
Okay.
which there's a little part there that says, once you submit your drawings, then it, that may alter whatnot. But back to the assessment that was done on my property, I don't feel that it was done in complete fairness on my behalf, for the simple fact is, nowhere along this line says somebody from the Heritage Department from Kingston ever had reached out to talk to me. I've left a few voicemails. I've talked to James today and asked him for the director's number, and I was refused that he was going to deal with it for me. And just as of, leading up to this, I don't feel like I'm getting represented properly. So to, be completely honest with you, I don't feel like everything has been up forth and honest to represent my property in its entirety.
Okay, all right, thanks for that. And then, yeah, James, yeah.
Thank you to the applicant, and I know we have spoken today several times, and he's also had conversations with the Commissioner of Community Services, and I believe Mr. Park last week before he went on vacation, or at least you followed up with him between the deferral and now to have these conversations about how to move forward. To speak to the last few points that were raised, the slab on grade consideration, and I'm sorry if there's been any misrepresentation in the process to date on this, and I truly apologize. Sometimes there is a consideration for a slab on grade building in Heritage Services if the building is of a small and significant enough size, but that wasn't consideration here in my talking with Heritage Services today. And in regards to the refusal of the director's number, all of our contact information at the city is public record, so that can easily be looked up. I know you wanted to have the conversation with them today, and they were ready to reach out to you, but you had conversations with several other people. So Heritage Services didn't want to reach out today. In addition to that, because we've had so many in-depth conversations with yourself and myself and the Commissioner of Community Services.
Okay, And just my final question here is, are the members of the Heritage Department or Committee?
Two separate things. So Heritage Services is the staff members associated with the City of Kingston, and Heritage Committee is like Committee of Adjustment, but for heritage applications, where they hear heritage applications in an open forum. But those are usually members of the public appointed by council to represent on that committee.
So we're talking Heritage Services in this case.
Correct. Heritage Services staff would review applications based on the archaeological master plan and make recommendations about what type of review would be required, if any at all, when determining if an archaeological assessment would be needed on an application. They typically don't visit sites when making recommendations based on the archaeological master plan, because that is in effect the purpose of the archaeological master plan, is to scope across the city at a very detailed level what properties and where are subject to an archaeological master plan. So if we think about the applications that come through Committee of Adjustment, not every one of them has the requirement for an archaeological assessment. Some just contain the standard archaeological condition, because they're in an area that does not have identified potential archaeological master plan considerations. And that standard archaeological condition just notes that if either disturbed things are in the ground, are fine to either call the Ministry of Tourism, Culture and Sport or the Ontario Provincial Police for matters of, items you might find under the ground. But this is an application where it's specifically identified as having composite archaeological potential, this property. So that's why Heritage Services made the recommendation for that consideration, because we are required to, under provincial legislation, to consider these matters as part of Planning Act applications.
Okay. And are the members of Heritage Services, the staff members, are they licensed archaeologists?
We have several heritage planners who have an Ontario Professional Planning, and is the director of, I'm blanking on the name and I've said it several times, Heritage Services. And then Mr. Gibbs is also a manager in Heritage Services, and both of them are licensed archaeologists.
Okay. All right. Thanks for that. Good. Okay. So at this point, I'll open the public any more questions? Okay. I'll open the public portion of the meeting. Do we have any members of the public with us in person or online who wish to speak to the application for 880 Stephentown Lane? Raise your virtual hand in Zoom or your physical hand in the room. I'll call a second time. Do we have anybody with us wishing to speak to the application for 880 Stephentown Lane? Please raise your hand, physical hand or virtual hand. My third and final call, do we have any members of the public with us wishing to speak to the application for 880 Stephentown Lane? Please raise a physical hand. And I see none at all. Okay, so I'll close the public portion of the meeting and we'll come back to, committee.
Through you, Mr. Chair,
Yes.
may I make a comment?
Absolutely, yeah.
Just from where I sit with this file, I think city staff have done some work on this. They've put forward an amendment. We have verified, both parties have verified that a visit was done since the last meeting. I do feel confident in the work that the city staff is doing on this. But I'd also like to mention that I do have empathy towards the property owner and the citizen, Mr. Carquez. There has been just here this evening just a decent amount of discussion just between the parties involved. I understand that timelines and time is not something that everybody has. I would just like to put forward that personally I have a sentiment and a feeling of maybe a little bit more time on this might be something that might be something required. And I know we've already deferred this once, but I would definitely be in support of a discussion or a thought of allowing more time and another deferral on this for whatever further discussions may be had between the parties involved.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, thanks for that. And Vincent?
I'm just curious to know what would, if we were to defer it again, what would change? Because as Heritage, they're pretty much set on this, they won't budge, or I mean, what else could be done? And is this the best that we could hope for to go forward? So that's my question.
Well, so why don't we then, we'll sort of press rewind just a little bit and we'll put the motion on the floor and get the discussion rolling. That's where we should really be. So I guess I need somebody to move and somebody to second. Oh, no, a motion right now to approve, and then we can take it from there. So motion to approve by Vincent and seconded by Craig. Okay.
Thank you.
All right, and then we move into discussion, and we've heard Greg's discussion, and I think you've raised a valid point, Vincent. What's there really to be gained? I don't know. It seems that the parties are somewhat entrenched in their positions. Somewhat entrenched in the positions. I guess a little disappointed that maybe the Heritage staff didn't or were unable, for whatever reason, to go and visit the property. If for any reason, just to even appease the applicant, that there was a strong consideration to their position. But I'm wondering if maybe we can amend, or I could have a friendly amendment to the condition that what we do is we say the need for an archaeological assessment would be required if any remains are found or if any evidence of archaeological potential is found once the construction starts. Is that, yes?
Through you, Mr. Chair. And would that entail, would that be incumbent upon the property owner to, they themselves come forward if they found something, and we would have trust in them that if they did find something, they would come to us within a timely fashion?
That's right. And I mean, there's a burden of proof on the excavator as well. If they discover bones or artifacts, to, stop and to notify the city. I don't know if that's palatable.
I think it's a good proposal, Mr.
Okay.
Chair.
And Vincent, would you agree to that amended condition?
Yeah, if it's a possible one, if it's something that's possible to do,
Yeah.
I would support it.
Okay, so James?
Thanks, and through you, Chair. Speaking to the deferral first, I don't think a deferral will actually achieve anything on this application. I think both the city and the applicant would like to see this application move forward. We are recommending approval of the application, so we have no cause or concern from a planning perspective to defer the application further, and I don't think that would actually help the applicant move forward with their ability to construct the garage either this year or next year. It would just add more time and burden to their costs. So I would say that a deferral is not high on a staff recommendation to move this forward tonight. We're at the will of the committee and your decisions in this, but the committee can amend the conditions as they see fit to remove the requirement for an archaeological assessment. If that is something that you do desire, we can replace it just with the standard archaeological condition, which isn't a requirement for an assessment, but it's the typical verbiage that we would put in any application where if archaeological considerations are found, the numbers there for contact. So it would just be a switch to the standard archaeological condition.
Okay,
That's all within the powers of the committee.
okay,
Through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
thanks.
Yes.
Thanks for that. So would you okay with that?
That's just a standard clause. If I dig and find something, obviously I report to the right avenues and go down the channels.
Yeah.
So then that the archaeological assessment is no longer, it's
It's no longer a pre-requirement to satisfy the requirements to get the building permit.
correct. Perfect.
But if you find anything, you've got everything has to stop. and-
Absolutely, 100%.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so I think everybody's good on that. So, all right. So everybody's at our piece. I'll call for the vote. All in favor, raise your physical hand. And that's unanimously carried. Thanks.
Perfect, thank you.
Yes, James?
I have nothing additional to add, but I can provide the standard archaeological condition to the clerks for
Okay.
inclusion in that recommendation.
Yes, okay. Okay. All right. Can you take care of that now?
I'll take care of that.
Okay, right. Okay, yeah, that's right. We have the decisions already prepared, but it'll have to be amended for a signature, so. Great. All right, thank you. All right, you can go. Thanks very much. should we do it now or wait till we have to do that?
Nope.
Okay. Right, okay.
I know.
Okay.
So that's why I'm worried.
Got it.
Sorry. Now deleted that was replaced with
Yeah.
we still get it.
So what we've just dealt with was number 8F, which was the amended recommendation, which we've changed. Now we have to deal with the application, which deals record, and we just move straight to the vote? Okay, yeah, I think we're there. So now I need a motion to accept the variances, all right? And that's moved by Vincent and seconded by Greg. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor, raise your physical hand, and that's unanimously carried. Thanks. Good? Okay. That was a different one. Okay, next file is first piece of business, 8A, which is 886 Rowan Tree Crescent. Lindsay, can I have you read that into the record? Zoom.
Through you, Mr. Chair, this is an application for minor variance at 886 Rowan Tree Crescent. The file number associated with the application is D13053-2022. And Tim Fisher will give a presentation on behalf of the city for this application.
Great. Hi, Tim, welcome.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, we have an application for minor variance at 886 Rowan Tree Crescent. The variance is requested to increase the maximum area for a deck, which is greater than 1.2 meters in height from finished grade, to construct a new deck at the rear of the dwelling and reconstruct a deck along the southern wall of the dwelling. The zoning bylaw takes into consideration the total area of all existing and proposed decks on the property, regardless of the height. So I just want to stress that before we move forward.
Okay.
Next slide, please. The subject property is located at 886 Rowan Tree Crescent and is developed with a partial 2-story single detached dwelling. The subject property is a pie-shaped lot which widens to the rear lot line and backs onto Bay Ridge Drive. The site is located within a residential neighborhood developed with single-family dwellings, with decks, pools, and other accessory structures. In reviewing the aerial imagery, it was observed that there are a number of decks along Rowan Tree Crescent with various heights and deck areas ranging from 30 square meters to 50 square meters. The property is designated residential in the official plan and zoned urban residential 1, UR1A, in the new Kingston zoning bylaw number 2022-62. Next slide. So here we have the site plan showing the location of the property itself and the proposal of the deck at the rear of the building and and you can see along the southern wall a sunroom and a deck proposed where there's already an existing deck. Next slide. So first we'll talk about the rear deck. So the applicant constructed a 22.2 square meter addition where an existing 22.2 square meter deck once was located at an average height of 1.4 meters. The applicant proposed to construct a 50.6 square meter deck at the rear of the dwelling. An area below the deck has a perimeter foundation of 4.4 square meters, which is not calculated as part of the deck area. Therefore, the calculated deck area is actually 46.2 square meters. The deck surface, including the 2 sets of stairs, which covers 3.6 square meters, deck is 1.4 meters. So just 0.2 meters above the required 1.2 meter. Next slide. A second deck is proposed along the southern wall of the house, which will replace an existing 7.4 square meter deck with a sunroom and a 3.7 square meter deck. The average height of this deck is 1.1 meters. This deck complies with the provisions for decks under 1.2 meters in height. The total area of all decks are calculated to determine the total floor area, regardless of height. Therefore, total of 49.9 square meters of deck area is proposed. Next slide. So based on a detailed review of the new Kingston zoning bylaw number 202262, it was determined that the following variance is required. So maximum area of a deck more than 1.2 meters in height above finished grade. The requirement is 30 square meters, and the applicant is proposing 49.9 square meters, which is a variance of 19.9 square meters. Next slide. So the subject property is surrounded by low-density residential dwellings, most of which contain attached decks in the rear yard. The construction and location of the new decks are compatible with the surrounding development and accommodates existing and new entrances from the main level of the dwelling to the deck. The deck is 1.8 meters in height at the dwelling and 1.5, sorry, that's supposed to be, made a mistake here, sorry. Height, and it is approximately 1.5 meters at the end of the deck itself. The elevated deck will be similar in construction to other dwellings in the neighborhood. The location of the decks are not anticipated to create any new negative impacts on the adjacent land uses regarding intrusive overlook or their continued enjoyment of their property. The zoning bylaw requires a minimum side yard setback of 1.2 meters for an elevated deck. The proposed decks will exceed the minimum setback. The new deck will be set back 6.86 meters from the northern lot line and 5 meters from the southern lot line. Next slide. Okay, so the former 22 square meter deck, which was removed to make way for the addition, was located adjacent to the northern portion of the lot and projected from the rear wall of the dwelling. The new deck is no higher than the previous deck and will be located further away from the northern lot line. No new negative impacts are imposed to the northern lot at 890 Rowan Tree Crescent. The grading of the property is dropped from what appears to be the highest point at 890 Rowan Tree Crescent. The property at 882 Rowan Tree Crescent has a lower grade than the subject property. A number of existing windows along the southern wall of the subject property overlook the adjacent property at 882. The deck and its increased setback will not result in any new negative impacts on the abutting lot to the south. Next slide. The requested variance is considered minor as the proposed variance will only apply to the subject property and the proposed decks and is not anticipated to have any negative impacts on the abutting residential uses. The proposal maintains the existing single detached dwelling use and will not result in any increase in units or bedroom counts. The subject property will continue to function appropriately as the driveway will be maintained from Rowan Tree Crescent. And a rear yard will be maintained. The existing means of egress and ingress from the dwelling will be maintained. The deck will provide safe outdoor amenity space to be accessed from the main level with safe access to the rear yard. The variance is desirable and appropriate use of the land. Next slide. The Planning Act requires a notice to be posted on the property. A notice was, or signage was posted on the property 10 days prior to the date of the meeting. And in addition, a total of 25 property owners received a public notice, which was by regular mail, and within a 16-meter radius, and a courtesy notice was placed within the Kingston WIG standard. Next slide. Let's see here. Sorry, I got ahead of myself here. So, public consultation, planning services received 2 written concerns, one from either neighbor from either side of the property. Those concerns or letters of concerns were provided to the committee members and to the applicant prior to this meeting. And this presentation would hopefully address some of the concerns and provide the information to the committee. Next slide. Okay. So the requested variance maintains the general intent and purpose of both the City of Kingston official plan and the Kingston zoning bylaw. The proposal is desirable and appropriate development and or use of the land, building, or structure, and the requested variance is considered minor in nature. As such, the proposed application meets all 4 tests under subsection 45(1) of the Planning Act, and the application is being recommended for approval as amended. Approval of this application will permit the construction of a rear and side deck to an existing single-family dwelling. I leave this in your hands.
Great, thanks very much. Okay, so do we have the applicant with us or online? Yes, if you could come to the seat and state your name and address for the record, please. Yeah, perfect.
My name is Sohail Umar Khattab. The address is 886 Rowan Tree Crescent, Kingston, Ontario.
Okay.
I was asked to bring my pictures on a USB.
Okay, yes. And, yep, I got those, thanks.
I don't really need it, but oh, I guess they do. Yeah. It is? Okay. Before I go on, I think it's important to address why we're here today. We had a deck on the property since we moved in there in 1994. And over the years, it became too dangerous to use, so it was taken out. This application, well, sorry, I don't know what's going on here. This application is for a minor variance to the zoning bylaw 7626 R18. The existing deck structure that we had, okay, this is having a mind of its own. The existing deck structure that we had became unsafe to use due to age. Rather than simply replacing the structure, it was elected to dig down about 4 feet to create an unheated storage space and workshop, a sunroom on top, and then build another deck further out from the house. Drawings and renderings were provided to Eric Trout to create the engineering drawings in support of a building permit. That permit was granted on 29th of March of this year. Unfortunately, the engineer did not include the slope of the ground in the original drawings and took the ground as being flat. You don't have a mouse, eh? You don't have a mouse? Okay. No. Okay, so this was the original drawing that the building permit was based on. And what it should have looked like, well, actually, if you look at this, the original drawing says the deck is about 2.5 feet off the ground. And this is obviously incorrect because if you look up here at the number of stairs, there are 6 steps. And for a rise of about 8 inches per step, you're going to get something like 48 inches, which is much more than 2 feet 8 inches. So this was pointed out to the engineer, and he said that it wasn't a concern. This could be changed once the construction got started. So when the deck structure itself was constructed, the building inspector noted that the deck was more than 2.5 meters, which is not in accordance with the drawings. And I mentioned to her that this is what the engineer had told us. And she said that because it was more than a certain height and more than 30 square meters, I'd need a minor variance. Now, if the engineer had done the correct measurements, that would have been caught at the building permit stage, and we could have made whatever changes we needed to at that time. However, it was caught after the deck structure was constructed. So revised drawings were requested, and this is what should have been submitted by the engineer. As you can see, instead of the ground being flat, there has a slope here to it. Now, the reason for the deck elevation was to keep it at the same level as the deck being replaced due to the existing sliding doors and basement windows. We had considered a multi-level deck. However, because of our medical issues with bad knees, we elected to have a level surface all across. So a level surface without steps was basically a necessity. This is a picture from Google Earth. It shows our dwelling. It shows 890 here, and 882 next to it. This is the area of the new deck. This small part was the area of the old deck. This is a rendering that I did, that I gave the engineer, along with the drawings that I had done of the proposed construction. This sunroom takes the place of the old deck. This is the new deck along here. This is the view north. That's the view south, west. Now, both neighbors have written about privacy concerns due to the height of the new deck. Before addressing this, I just want to make a comment that we ourselves have no privacy from either neighbor. Our entire backyard is visible from the deck at 890 Rowan Tree Crescent, and our entire backyard is visible from the kitchen windows at 882 Rowan Tree Crescent. This sign was put up in accordance with the requirements on the evening of 6th October. This is a view at 882 Rowan Tree Crescent from our breakfast nook window. This is what we can see right now. Before any construction began, that was the view. And if you note, these items in here, I'll show you another picture, because I don't have a pan of it. That's the same items, so you can see that's what we see in their backyard. This is the view of their backyard from our kitchen window. This is a view of the backyard from the dining room window. This structure, this privacy screen, was constructed after our construction began. And it was to cover or provide them with privacy for, this is my understanding, privacy for the new sunroom that they built a couple of years ago, which is over here. This is a picture of our old deck. As you can see, it extends farther out from the house here. This is now where the sunroom is. This is the position of the patio door. And there's another patio door over here. This is a basement window. There's another basement window underneath this. The preliminary plans and renderings of what the addition would look like were shown to Mrs. Forrest about 18 months ago. Those are the renderings I showed you earlier. On 6th of May, I walked around the construction with Mrs. Forrest and talked to her about what was being built. On 18th June, Mr. Cameron came over to look at the construction, while Mr. Redmond, the other neighbor, was removing dirt from our yard. They both engaged in a conversation. At no time while I was present was any concern expressed regarding my issues, regarding any issues that they might have had. When the drawings and the renderings were shown to Mrs. Forrest, she did not indicate any concerns either. In fact, she stated this is going to be looking like a good addition, or it would look good once it's built, something to that effect. The privacy issue, as I indicated, I've shown you the pictures from inside our house. There are no new areas visible from the deck that are not already visible from those windows. From the old deck, we can still see their backyard from this part where it sticks out of the breakfast nook. The new deck is over 23 feet further away from the fence line than the end of the house, than where the windows are that are facing their house. The relief sought in this application is for an increase in the size of the deck. Ms. Forrest has written to me in a text message that she had no objection to the size of the deck. And that's what this variance is for. It's not for the height. The part of the deck that she is concerned about still meets the building requirements, the bylaw requirements. That part of the deck cannot be altered now because this is the entrance to the workshop and the storage area that was built. The height of the deck in relation to the house itself is no higher than what the old deck was. Regarding the concerns of Miss Lindsay Redmond, these neighbors have been aware of the addition since the construction started in May. On 12th June, after the excavation was done, or before the excavation was done actually, they requested to buy the excavated material for use in their own yard. I showed the renderings to Mr. Redmond when I asked him for assistance in reinstalling the garden hose pipe. I declined their offer of remuneration and I just gave them the material. Trying to be a good neighbor. And I allowed them to remove as much as they needed. So there's Mr. Redmond removing the dirt into his own yard. And that's how much they took, and later they took the rest of it as well. Now, if you look, this is the kitchen window at 882 Rowan Tree Crescent. So you can see they have a full view of our backyard. There's no privacy from that window. I actually paid Mr. Redmond $50 because to defer the cost of the fuel that he was using to move all that dirt. At no time was any concern expressed regarding any issues Mr. Redmond or Mrs. Redmond had regarding the size of the deck, regarding the height. And it was obvious from here where the deck was going to be. This is the deck pan that is above the little hallway that goes into the workshop and the storage area. So they knew it was going to be at that height. And there's a ledger here, you can't see it, that the deck joists rest on. And that ledger was there in full view. The backyard at 890 Rowan Tree was visible from the old deck. This is the area of the old deck that the sunroom now rests in. And you can see that there's a deck that they have on their property. Here's a close-up of it, getting closer, so you can see this is what we can see in their backyard from the old deck. The new deck is in this direction out this window, and it's farther away than from the fence line.
One more minute?
Sure. It's farther away from the fence line. It's about 22 feet. So there's no new area that we can see that's visible from there. Our breakfast nook was fully visible from their deck, which incidentally did not exist when we moved into the house in '94. So I'm really at a loss to understand why they have concerns about privacy. I'll upload this to Dash tonight in case anybody else needs to look at it.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Thank you. Okay, so committee members, do you have any questions for the applicant or for staff? Greg, yep.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. Sir, do you agree that not only yourself, but the other parties that have submitted documents on this file have mentioned privacy as something of importance for both yourself and them? I.e., I hear privacy from, I'm read and hear privacy as something, I just get the impression that from listening to you speak and from the addendum here, that both parties actually acknowledge that privacy is something that needs to be respected, and I absolutely agree with that. And I wonder if you feel at this point that everybody is acknowledging that privacy is something that needs to be respected, that we can get by this issue and really kind of move forward comfortably with addressing that this be approved or disapproved. Do you understand what I mean?
I understand what you're saying. My point of view is that if privacy was such a concern, why was it not mentioned earlier?
I think that we're here now, and I think that it has
Yes,
been mentioned
but
now.
now is a bit late after the construction has taken place. Now, I agree that the construction, I wish this was caught earlier because, as I said, we've tried to be very good neighbors for the past since 94, since we moved in there. And none of this was a secret. I've shared everything that we've done on that property. There was a time when Ms. Forrest wanted to change the fence. I wasn't happy with the fence that she selected because it didn't match the fence that we had put in our backyard. But it matched the fence on the other side that she had. And it matched, it was lower, but it matched the fence that she was putting in her backyard. So I just asked for a small change to make the fence boards closer so that you'd have a little more privacy. Because the fence we had didn't have gaps in it. The ones that she selected did. So we worked that out, okay? We had an amicable solution. It cost more, and it didn't match what we had, but I could live with it. So if this was such an issue, then it should have been brought up when I showed her the plans, when I showed her the renderings, and we could have made some changes. I could have put the door on the other side. I could have put the entrance on the other side. Can't do that now. Now, the material's been purchased, the deck boards, the tracks is just sitting there. It's not attached. I had to get it off the driveway. But there's enough there bought for the entire deck. So half of that is now, if it doesn't get built, it's useless. The structure has to be taken down as well. So we're looking at a major expense. And it's an expense that could have been avoided. Now, you want to talk about privacy. Like I said, we've got no privacy in our backyard. So what is it? It's okay for us not to have any, but they should? Both
I understand.
neighbors
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
That's good, thank you. Vincent, do you have any questions for the applicant or staff?
Yeah. So the deck has already been partially built, I take it?
The structure has been built. That's when it was caught.
Okay, so,
just-
and then,
Yeah, I just want to make it clear that the engineer would not let us look at the final drawings until after I made full payment. So when I did see that, and I did mention it to him, he said that, don't worry about it, it's not important, we can fix it later.
So I'm sorry, I think, Vincent, your question was, has the deck been partially built? And is the question yes?
So
The question, the answer is yes. Oh.
so, but my question is really though, what the minor variance that's needed, so the deck was started being built without a variance, or was it the initial, if without the mistake that was made, wouldn't have required a minor variance, and that's why it's triggered, or would it have required a minor variance no matter what?
We did not know it required a minor variance. When I talked to the engineer, he said it's not a building code issue, it's a bylaw issue.
So Tim, did you want to chime in on this?
Yes, through you there, Mr. Chair. The deck provision addresses certain heights, and certain heights require special zoning provisions. So it's broken down more or less into 3 categories. So you have a deck which is 0.6 meters or less, and then you have another which would be 0.6 meters to 1.2 meters, and then you have any other deck which is greater than 1.2 meters in height. So the initial building permit that came in with the error on the deck showed that it would comply with the 0.6 meters up to 1.2 meters, which allows for up to 10% of the lot area to be covered by a deck. Now, because of the change in the drawings to accommodate the grade, it then all of a sudden bumped it up to the next category, which is 10% of the lot area, of which a maximum of 30 square meters is permitted at a height of 1.2 meters or greater. So that was the only variance that we saw, was virtually the size of the deck based on the height. In regards to the deck itself, and in regards to the height and privacy, the owner could build a smaller deck at the same height and still have the same privacy issues, let's say. So this is just a proposal to allow a slightly larger deck. Now, I also want to add here as well too, that these provisions are typically put for your average lot that we see in the urban boundary. So we know of smaller lots that are being created now. So we've put a maximum area for these smaller lots, because we don't initially, this provision is to, I guess, eliminate an entire backyard being used as a deck. Now, it doesn't take in consideration lots, or the older lots with larger backyards, or in this case, a yard that's pie-shaped with a larger yard. So if somebody wanted to build a slightly bigger deck, they would have to come in for a minor variance if it's greater than 1.2 meters in height. The other issue, and I touched on this before, is that the total gross floor area of the deck is calculated based on all decks that are there, regardless of height. So you can have a very small percentage. Let's say he came in with a very small deck, which was of 1.2 meters or more, but yet the rest of his deck was going to be slightly lower. we would still be here requesting the same variance. So I'm happy to answer any questions or clarify any matters in regards with this issue.
Does that help, Vincent?
Yeah, so if it was 23.9 square meters less, it would not, they could just build it as of right. And it was a mistake made by the contractor or whoever designed this. Okay, that's all I wanted to know.
Okay, good. Any other questions? Okay, so now I'll open the public portion of the meeting. So do we have any members of the public with us this evening wishing to speak to the application for 886 Rowan Tree Crescent? Come up to the seat and and just tap the button on the mic. It lights up red, and we'll get you to state your name and address for the record, please. Welcome.
Connie Forrest, 882 Rowan Tree Crescent.
Okay. Yes.
I did submit a presentation.
Yeah.
Is that available?
Do we already have it?
I do have hard
It's part
copy.
of the addendum, so we do have that information with us, yes.
All right, because I was just going to speak to it.
Yep, that's fine.
I understood I had 5 minutes.
5 minutes,
So
Yeah.
I'm going to speak to my slides, and I'll probably talk very quickly. You'll have the slides in front of you then?
Yes,
Okay.
I do, yep.
So if we could just move to slide 2, please, that would move things along. So good evening. I am the immediate neighbor to the applicants, and I've owned and lived in my property for 36 years. I have submitted 6 slides, and as I was not familiar with this process, I utilized the guide for opposing applications. Subsequent to submitting my presentation, the city planner emailed me a copy of the staff report. I would like to note, though, going off notes here, the notice of public meeting and the variance requested that I received is different than what the city planner presented tonight. So that's the first I'm seeing the amended numbers. So when I refer to my comments, I'm talking about what I have in the staff report and what was provided to me in the original notice, okay? So numbers don't sound the same. The applicants advised that they would hire an architectural engineer and hire a general contractor, and then a permit would be obtained. We anticipated that the permit would follow city bylaws. I understand that the minor variance is not a simple mathematical calculation, but also believe it cannot be ignored. The minor variance is approximately 80% greater than the requirement under the bylaw. Due to the height being greater than 1.2 meter high, this also requires a 42-inch railing versus a typical 36. The railing and the proposed deck is approximately 3 feet above the permittable height of the 6-foot privacy fence between our properties. This allows the applicants to look directly into our backyard. I'm going to go off a little bit because of what I've recently heard from the applicant. There is a privacy issue for both of us. And further, I don't know why the applicant would want us looking at them on a high deck either. There is a privacy issue for both of us. The city planner's report states several times that the proposed elevated rear deck will not result in any anticipated negative impacts to adjacent properties. However, nowhere has this been substantiated by the planner. I constantly read in the report that there's no negative impact, but there's nothing to substantiate that statement. I don't even know how you assess privacy. So that's a bit of a concern. The staff report indicates that the existing single detached dwelling is developed with a 22 deck at the rear of the dwelling, and the owner proposes to remove the existing deck. I subsequently have know that the applicant has acknowledged that deck was taken down about 5 years ago. So I just wanted to note that in the report, it says the deck's going to be taken down. So there's some confusion in the planner's report. If you move to slide 3, please. The applicants advised us on August 27th, when seeking our support for their minor variance, that the original height on the permit, which is what we understood for the deck, was 2.5 feet high, less than a meter. And the engineer made an error and did not factor in the grade. The applicant is an engineer. There was an architectural engineer and a general contractor involved. Why should we be negatively impacted due to what the applicant states is an engineer's error? We trusted that the engineer drawings would be followed and that it was not going to be any higher than 2.5 feet. The bylaw was established for heights greater than 1.2 meter high. I can only assume that consideration by the city was given to neighboring properties' privacy when determining that a 30 square meter area should meet the 1.2 meter high requirements. So I don't understand why that is not being enforced. You have a bylaw.
One more minute?
Yeah, okay. We understand with the new entrance, the applicant wishes to step out onto the deck pan and exit their addition, which is sky high, but we anticipated a lower deck. The Planning Act requires minor variance comply with 4 tests. In viewing the guide, every test should address privacy. 3 of those tests, in my opinion, do not meet the privacy, and the primary negative impact is what affects us. If you go to slide 4, I've included the slide to speak to the efforts I have made to provide my objection to this application. From September 6th to the 23rd, I made phone calls, left messages, and emailed several times, and not until the 23rd did I receive a response from the assigned planner. On September 28th, I contacted the local city ward councillor, and she advised that I write the committee asking that they amend the approval in such a way that the overlook is reduced and to provide pictures showing the effect on my privacy and impact to property value. Only have 2 quick more things to say.
Thanks very much. I'm sorry, your time is up.
So the applicant gets a lot more time, just to
Well,
clarify?
your time is up. We've given you your 5 minutes. So thanks very much. And we do actually have all of the data you gave us, and we actually have read it. So, and we're very thankful to have that. Thank you very much. Are there any other members of the public with us this evening who wish to speak to the application for 886 Rowan Street Crescent? Please raise your hand. Or do we have anybody in the gallery? Okay, and I'll make my third and final call. Do we have anybody with us this evening wishing to speak to the application for 886 Rowan Tree Crescent? Please raise your physical hand or your virtual hand in Zoom. I'm seeing none, so I'll close the public portion of the meeting and turn this back to staff or the applicant to address some of the issues that we just heard. I think a lot of them have actually already been addressed by Tim, but maybe we'll have Tim chime in on that.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. Do you have a specific question in mind, or?
Is there anything that was mentioned that you haven't covered? I think most of them have been. There was an issue of the height of the railing being 42 inches, privacy issue for everybody, doesn't feel that you've substantiated the privacy issue. Yeah, an indication that the deck had been taken down, but somewhere in here it says the deck, or intimates the deck was existing.
Okay. Through you, Mr. Chair, one of the issues that were brought up was the difference in what was on the sign and public notice versus what is in front of us. The proposal or the recommendation in front of the committee is an amended one based on the zoning bylaw. So again, we took a second look at the proposal based on our new zoning bylaw and the new definitions and interpretations, that sort of thing. And we determined that there are some sections that were not required to be part of the deck calculation. So we wanted to provide an actual calculation that is true to the zoning bylaw. So the numbers aren't greater than what was previously advertised. It was lesser. So, and in regards to privacy, yes, that is an interesting matter because in our official plan, there is a section under 2.7 which talks about adverse effects on adjacent properties, and we do look at will the proposal cause any new or adverse impacts that will hinder the continued use or the impacts on existing privacy onto the adjacent properties. So in this case, again, the elevation of this property is slightly higher than Mrs. Forster's property herself. So any deck that would be built would be higher than a deck that would be typically built on her property. Now, I believe her deck is a ground deck. However, if she was to build a deck at her main level, it would be approximately, by judging from the subject property, when I did a site visit, it would appear roughly about 3.5 feet, maybe 4 feet. So it would be very similar to what the subject property is.
Okay. And there were problems and discrepancies with the engineer's drawings?
Yeah, so at time of building permit, the applicant submitted the drawings that were provided to him by his architect or his engineer. And then when the building inspector was out on site, noticed that when the framing was going up for the deck, that the deck was actually higher than what was in the drawing. So at that time, everything was put on hold in regards to the deck. So right now it's just the framing that is up. However, the concrete walls, the support walls, and also the sunroom or the addition is fully built.
Okay. Great. And then the last issue here was just it ties back to the 4 tests and touching on the whole privacy issue that I think is the central issue to this whole bit.
Yeah, so the planner's report speaks to, again, section 2.7, which deals with adverse impacts and such. Also deals with a 9 section in regards to considering the project as appropriate and desirable. So city staff reviewed the official plan, and we determined that it meets or is consistent with the policies in the official plan in regards to urban development, residential development, and appropriate and desirable development. And it's our determination that it would not cause any new impacts on the adjacent neighbors. The zoning bylaw, now it is technically in keeping with the bylaw, subject to the minor variance for the size. And again, the size itself is also based on the size of the rear yard, which I touched earlier. And again, the other two is appropriate and desirable development. Yes, again, through the test of the official plan, we determined that. And also, we also determined that it was minor in nature, again, through the tests of within our official plan.
Okay, thanks for that, Tim. And did you want to say one more thing? You did have to. Yeah. Okay. I see. Okay.
When I was speaking to him, he interrupted me, so he didn't hear me out.
Okay.
Okay, so that's why it's not, the engineer did not make the mistake that it was 2.5 feet. What he did not do was take the grade into account, which is the reason of the 2.5.
Okay, thanks very much for that.
Mr. Chair, may I ask?
Yes.
Yes, I just want to reconfirm, Tim, that you were able to hear Ms. Forrest and that we confirm that everything that Ms. Forrest presented to us here tonight was on record. I just would like to reconfirm that.
Yes, through Mr. Chair, I can confirm that I did hear and address the issues.
Thank you.
Good.
And through you, Mr. Chair, I can also confirm, as I was in the room and I'm taking the notes. So if something was a little bit more inaudible, it will appear in the minutes.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Great,
Thank you.
thanks very much. Okay, so I guess that's that. Unless staff want to make any other comments, I'll turn it over to the committee for a decision and a vote. So moved by Greg and seconded by Vincent. Right, okay, so there's been an amendment to this. Tim has, in his presentation, amended some of the dimensions. So in fact, the variances that are being requested are actually less than was on the public notice. So are you okay that your motion reflects that, the updated numbers?
Yes.
Okay, and Vincent, you're good with that too? Okay, so any discussion on this?
Through you, Mr. Chair, just that I appreciate Ms. Forrest coming and speaking and taking the time she did to present what she did, and also to the applicant. Thank you very much.
Right. And I also, I feel for all the applicants. I feel for the applicant, I feel for the neighbors. I've been there, I've been through this stuff a lot. You know, it's unfortunate. It does sound like there's some good camaraderie, I think, within the neighborhood and within the neighbors and sharing and such. And I certainly hope that can continue despite what happens this evening. But yeah. Okay, so no other comments. Vincent, yes?
My only comment would be, yeah, it's unfortunate, like from both sides, it's a hard one. But what about if something could be added, like a lattice top to the fences to add some privacy or something like that, that might hopefully be not an expensive addition, but could alleviate some of the privacy issues. Because since like if we were to decline this and everything would be like lost as an expense, and this might be a, you know, maybe a middle ground where it would be like a much lesser expense, but could alleviate some of the privacy issues.
Right.
I'm not sure if that's even a possibility, but it would be, maybe it would be something nice to do.
Okay, Tim, did you want to chime in?
Thank you, and through you,
James,
Mr.
sorry.
Chair. My name is James. Tim is up on the screen. I understand you've been saying his name a bit for tonight, but I'll chime in on this one. So, committee does have broad powers to impose conditions as part of any recommendation. Planning staff, when reviewing this application, didn't feel the need to recommend any privacy mitigation concerns because there is a sizable distance between this deck and the side lot line. We have to remember that the property owner themselves has the ability to build a deck at this height that is 30 square meters in size.
That's right.
The benefit with this property and it being pie-shaped and the deck being center or concentrated in the center of the lot with the house is that the further back the lot lines go, the further this property, or sorry, the further this deck actually gets from the adjacent properties. In an urban environment, the deck that's currently proposed, if it was 30 square meters in size, could be built 4 feet from a neighboring lot line. As we've heard tonight, this deck starts at 5 meters back from adjacent lot lines. If you translate that into feet, I'm really bad at this. I think that's like 15 feet or more,
Right.
something like that. So, you know, we're already dealing with increased sizable setbacks from adjacent neighbors. And in planning staff's consideration, when we're looking at undue adverse impacts, the distance was a solid mitigating factor in our consideration of this deck. So we didn't feel the need to impose any such condition on the applicant that would add additional costs and engineering to their deck. Maybe the property owners between them could discuss other matters of mitigation that would be appropriate for either parties, but planning staff did not feel as part of this recommendation that any sort of mitigation would be required.
Thanks for that. And I felt the same when I looked at it and when I saw the pie shaped of the lot and how the further the deck goes back, it is kind of, there's less intrusion. Okay, Vincent?
Yep.
Okay. All right, so ready to call a vote. All in favor of the motion as amended? Raise your hand, physical. And that's unanimously approved. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, the next application is for 813 Victoria Street. Lindsay, can I have you read this into the record, please?
Through you, Mr. Chair, this is an application for minor variance, file number D13052-2022 at 813 Victoria Street. Ricardo Peggi will give the presentation for this application.
Great, thank you. Welcome.
Thank you.
everybody looks different in person. Online, everybody looks fuzzy. There's this fuzzy aura around them. So I've seen people in person.
Yeah, the glow of Zoom, right?
What's that?
The glow of Zoom.
The glow of Zoom, or the glow of the backgrounds, right?
Yeah. Oh. All right, I can just. And sorry, do I have control over going forward, or do I have to? Yes. All right, good evening, and through you, Mr. Chair, I'm presenting an application for minor variance at 813 Victoria Street. So the purpose of the application is to replace an existing garage with a new 79.8 square meter accessory building with a garage, rooftop amenity space, and a personal gym. So the property is located at the corner of Victoria Street and Dorrance Street in the Kings Court neighborhood. The property is about 405 square meters in size. The existing house fronts onto Victoria Street with the existing and proposed accessory buildings fronting onto Dorrance. The requested variances are for maximum height and maximum lot coverage for accessory buildings. The maximum height is 4.6 meters and the applicant is proposing 4.9 meters. The maximum lot coverage is 10% and the applicant proposes 19.7% of the lot. So here you can see the site plan. The building is divided into the gym portion and the larger gym portion and the smaller garage portion. The building will remain smaller in size compared to the principal dwelling and maintains the required setbacks for accessory structures. I'll also note that the properties will still maintain the required landscaped open space. The rooftop patio is marked by the X. You can kind of see it there over top of the garage portion, and is also stepped back from the neighboring property to mitigate any potential for overlook. So it's set back about 2 meters further on top of the building there. So here are the elevations. The maximum height provision is exceeded just by 0.3 meters because of some decorative flourishing that you can see on the north elevation there. And the applicant also proposes to plant a green roof over top of the gym portion of the building. So all public notification requirements were met regarding this application. No public correspondence was received. And so as detailed in the report presented to committee, the application meets the 4 tests required to approve minor variances as outlined in subsection 45(1) of the Planning Act, and it is staff's recommendation to approve the application subject to the proposed conditions. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Okay, at this point, we have the applicant. Identify yourself by name and address, please.
John Wright, 305 Rideau Street.
Thanks
John Wright, 305 Rideau Street.
Okay, thanks and welcome. Is there anything further you want to add to the application?
I'd just like to underscore that the height increase, approximately 1 foot, is the parapet in front of the garage door only.
Okay. And is that just decorative?
Decorative, such a dirty word.
I know. Functionally
Yes,
decorative.
yes.
Okay, got it. Thank you. Okay, committee members, do you have any questions for the applicant or staff? No? I asked mine, and all right, so I'll open the public portion of the meeting. Do we have anybody with us wishing to speak to the application for 813 Victoria Street? Please raise your physical hand or virtual hand in Zoom. Do we have anybody with us this evening wishing to speak to the application for 813 Victoria Street? Raise your physical hand or virtual hand in Zoom. My third and final call, would anybody like to speak to the application for 813 Victoria Street? Please raise your physical hand or virtual hand in Zoom. I see none, so I'll close the public portion of the meeting and come back to the committee for a motion. Moved by Greg and seconded by Vincent. Any discussion? No, all in favor, raise your physical hands, and that's unanimously carried. Thank you. Okay, next one is application number C for 3 Carley Court. Lindsay, could you read that into the record, please?
Through you, Mr. Chair, next is an application for minor variance and consent at 3 Carley Court. The file numbers are D13056-2022 and D10022-2022. Jason Partridge will give the presentation for this application.
Thanks very much. Welcome, Jason.
Good evening to you, Chair. This is an application for 3 Carley Court for minor variance and consent. Next slide, please. The purpose and effect of the consent and minor variance application is to sever the lands municipally known as 3 Carley Street to create a new lot for the purpose of developing a semi-detached dwelling. 3 minor variances are requested to reduce the minimum lot frontage, minimum lot area, and minimum side yard setback for a corner lot in order to allow for the severance to take place. Next slide, please. The 3 variances that I just mentioned. First one is for the lot frontage. Variance requested is 1.05 meters. The minimum lot area, now just to note, this is just for the northern severed lot, which is also indicated on the key map that'll be on the next slide, is for 23.9 square meters. And the third variance is for the minimum side yard on a corner lot, and this is for the southern lot, noted on the key map on the next slide, and it's for 1.5 meters. Next slide, please. So 3 Carley Court is located just south of the 401 and west of Montreal Street. And it's at the corner of Gunther Drive and right there. So next slide, please. So this is the site plan that's going to be on the notice of decision as well. It's demonstrating both of the lots being severed with a common party wall and a proposed semi-detached dwelling on there. Next slide, please. The requested consent and variances maintains the general intent and purpose of the City of Kingston official plan and zoning bylaw number 2022-62. The proposal is desirable for the appropriate development or use of the land, building, or structure, and the requested variance is minor in nature. As such, the proposed application meets all 4 tests of subsection 45. The Planning Act and the application is being recommended for approval subject to proposed conditions. Approval of this application will allow for the severance of 1 lot and for the construction of a proposed semi-detached dwelling on the property. Thank you. Just to note, we did receive 1 objection from the public, and that was provided to the committee this afternoon.
Yes, we received that. Thanks. Thanks,
Yes.
Jason. Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Do we have the applicant or agent here to speak to this? If you could take a seat and just identify yourself by name and address, please. Sure.
Yes, the applicant, Pedro Martins, 922 Ironwood Road, Kingston.
Okay, is there anything further you want to add to the application tonight?
No, I think it's pretty straightforward,
Okay.
as Jason has pointed out.
And had you seen that additional piece of correspondence?
I did see it this morning. Trying to understand the relevance, but
Okay, that's fine. Okay, good. All right, committee members, do you have any questions for the applicant? Vincent?
Yeah, so with the correspondence, saying that this is an area used by resident dogs, and I think people seem to be using it as a park, but isn't this a private lot that isn't a public space? It's just,
No, it's a, if I answer that, yeah, it's a private lot that I've owned for about 7 years. There is a park adjacent to it. I do see a path, people probably cut through it, but it's quite noticeably a buildable lot. It's in a developed subdivisions, just never got built.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions, committee members? I have none, so I'll open the public portion of the meeting. Do we have any members of the public wishing to speak to the application for 3 Carly Court? Please raise your virtual hand in Zoom or your physical hand in the room. Nobody's in the public, sorry. Okay, so do we have anybody in here wishing to speak to the application for 3 Carly Court? Raise your physical hand. My third and final call, is anybody willing to speak to the application for 3 Carly Court? Raise your physical hand. I see none, so I'll close the public portion of the meeting and come back to the committee for a motion. Moved by Greg and seconded by Vincent. Any discussion? All in favor, raise your physical hands, and that's unanimously carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Next application is number D, which is for 2 Rudd Avenue. Lindsay, can you read this into the record, please?
Through you, Mr. Chair, this is an application for minor variance at 2 Rudd Avenue. The file number is D13054-2022, and Anne-Marie Eusebio will give the presentation for this application.
Hello, welcome, Anne-Marie.
Hello, good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, staff, and members of the public. The minor variance application presented before you this evening is for the property known as 2 Red Avenue. The purpose and effect is to request relief from the minimum rear setback and a minimum exterior setback to permit the construction of a 1-story garage addition. Next slide, please. These are the requested variances. To facilitate the construction of the garage, a minor variance will be required to reduce the minimum rear setback from 7.5 meters to 3.77 meters. A minor variance is also required to reduce the minimum exterior setback from 6.1 meters to 1.5 meters. Next slide, please. This is the key map. The site is a corner lot which is located along Red Avenue and Carpenter Avenue. The lot is currently developed with a 2-story single-family dwelling within the rural area in Kingston East. The immediate area mainly consists of single detached dwellings, and the site is close to the St. Lawrence River located east of the property. Next slide, please. Subject site is designated as rural lands in the official plan and is located within the rural residential zone in zoning bylaw 2022-62. This is the site. And next slide, please. This is the site plan for the subject property. A 2-story single-family dwelling was constructed on the subject property in 2020. A single-family dwelling and detached garage previously existed on the site. The applicant is proposing to construct the garage with a total area of 49.4 square meters. Relief is required to reduce the minimum rear setback from 7.5 meters to 3.77 meters and to reduce the minimum exterior setback from 6.1 meters to 1.5 meters. Access into the garage can be obtained through Carpenter Avenue or Red Avenue. Next slide, please. These are photos from a recent site visit. For locational context, this photo is taken from Red Avenue facing the house on the property. The darker portion on the second photo is what looks to be a driveway is actually Carpenter Avenue, which is a public road as confirmed by the survey submitted with this application and the city's legal services. There are no buildings that front onto Carpenter Avenue. Next slide, please. These are the elevation drawings. There will be no significant visual impacts to the existing streetscape. Proposed development will be compatible with existing development along Red Avenue. In terms of scale, style, and massing, the proposed garage will not negatively impact the rural character or ecological integrity of the immediate area. The proposed garage addition will be located approximately 20 meters from the neighboring dwelling located south of property and approximately 41 meters away from the existing dwelling located west of the site. It's anticipated there will be no shadowing impacts, visual intrusion, or privacy issues, and the proposal will not create adverse impacts on surrounding residential properties. Next slide, please. With respect to public consultation, signs were posted on the subject site 10 days in advance of the meeting. Notices were sent by mail to a total of 14 properties within 60 meters of the subject property. A courtesy notice was placed in the WIC standard, and to date, no correspondence has been received. Next slide, please. The requested variances maintain the general intent and purpose of the official plan and zoning bylaw 2022-62. The proposal for a one-story garage addition is desirable for the appropriate development or use of the land and meets all 4 tests under the Planning Act. Therefore, we recommend approval of this application. Thank you very much for your time, and that concludes my presentation. I would be happy to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Thank you. Okay, do we have the applicant with us? Jessica Brooks.
Hi.
Hi, so I just have you identify yourself by name and address, please.
Yep, so my name is Jessica Brooks and I am the applicant at 2 Red Avenue.
Okay, anything further you wish to add to the application?
Nope, Anne Marie summed it up great.
Great. Also, so committee members, do you have any questions for Ms. Brooks? None at all. So I'll open the public portion of the meeting. Do we have any members of the public wishing to speak to the application for 2 Rudd Avenue? All right, I don't see anybody. Do we have anybody in person or through Zoom who wishes to speak to the application for 2 Rudd Avenue? Please raise your virtual hand in Zoom or physical hand. And my third and final call is anybody wishing to speak to the application for 2 Rudd Avenue, please raise your virtual hand or physical hand. And I see none. I'll close the public portion of the meeting and come back to the committee for a motion. So moved by Greg and seconded by Vincent. All right, any discussion? No discussion. So all in favor, raise your physical hands. And that's unanimously carried. Thank you. All right, and our final application this evening is number E, which is for 720 Princess Street. Lindsay, can you read this into the record, please?
Through you, Mr. Chair, our last application tonight is for minor variance at 720 Princess Street. The file number is D13-050-2022. And Megan Robidoux will give the presentation for this application.
Thank you. Welcome, Megan.
This on? Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. This is an application for a minor variance for 720 Princess Street. The purpose and effect of the application is to reduce the number of required vehicle parking spaces from 0.5 parking spaces per dwelling unit to 0.31 parking spaces per dwelling unit to recognize the existing condition of the site. No modifications to the existing building or site configuration are proposed. The subject property is located within the Williamsville Main Street area on the south side of Princess Street between Macdonnell Street to the west and Victoria Street to the east. Designated Main Street Commercial in the official plan and is located in the Williamsville Zone 1 with legacy exception L385 in Kingston zoning bylaw 2262. The site plan shown here was approved in 2019 to facilitate an increase in the number of dwelling units on site from 70 to 94, with 17 off-site parking spaces to be located at 411 Macdonnell Street. The owner of the subject property entered into an agreement with the city and the owner of 411 Macdonnell to permit the off-site parking. However, the agreement does not provide the same legal rights as an easement, and the owner has been unable to secure an easement for this off-site parking at 411 Macdonnell Street. So as a result, the site is unable to comply with the existing parking requirements in the zoning bylaw. A minor variance is requested to reduce the minimum number of required parking spaces from 0.5 parking spaces per dwelling unit to 0.31 parking spaces per dwelling unit to recognize the existing condition of the site with 30 on-site parking spaces for 94 dwelling units as shown here. Under Kingston zoning bylaw 2262, one variance is required from the required parking provision of legacy exception L385. The applicant has submitted a parking study in support of this application, which was prepared by Forefront Engineering, which concludes that the requested reduction is appropriate and the site will continue to provide parking that meets the needs of residents and visitors and will not place demand on the public parking supply. The subject property is well situated within walking distance of transit stops, transit routes, active transportation infrastructure, such as sidewalks and bicycle lanes, and various amenities, including parks and commercial uses. Further, bicycle parking spaces are required to be provided on the subject site at a rate of 1 per dwelling unit. Pursuant to the requirements of the Planning Act, a notice of statutory public meeting was provided by advertisement in the form of signs posted on the subject site 10 days in advance of this meeting. In addition, notices were sent by mail to 36 properties within 60 meters of the subject property, and a courtesy notice was placed in the Kingston Whig Standard. No public correspondence has been received regarding this application to date. The requested application for minor variance is consistent with the general intent and purpose of both the City of Kingston official plan and the new Kingston zoning bylaw. The proposal is desirable for the appropriate development of the land and is not anticipated to result in adverse impacts to the surrounding properties or the neighborhood. Approval of this application will provide for the continuation of the existing multi-residential use on the subject property containing 75 market rental units and 19 affordable housing units in a location that is intended to support high-density residential uses and is well supported by transit and active transportation infrastructure. With that, I am happy to answer any questions.
Great, thanks very much. So at this point, I'll call on the applicant or their agent to identify yourself by name and address, please.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. My name is Yuko Leclerc. Can you hear me?
I hear you fine, yes.
Excellent, thank you. I'm Yuko Leclerc. I'm a planner with Foten Planning and Design. We are planners for the applicant. And I'm here this evening to answer any questions and provide any commentary as requested by the committee.
Great, thanks very much and welcome. Committee members, do you have any questions for the applicant or their agent? Great.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. I'm just trying to remember, we had an application for the unit pretty much right across the road a month or two ago, and they were doing essentially this, it seems very similar to, the circumstances seem to be very similar. I wish, I can picture the building, it's right on the corner there, it has that round face to it. I'm just wondering, are these properties owned by the same company? Do we know? Is that appropriate? Am I allowed to ask that? Is that? Because I'm just wondering, I just have a concern. My concern is that this is two buildings that were recently built that are now reducing their parking amounts to do other things with, and the stress on the parking already on Princess Street and for businesses and stuff is just something that pops into my mind. And I'm just wondering, with the proximity of these two properties being close together, I just wanted it to be noted.
Sure.
And so it's not really so much a question directed to the applicant themselves, but it's just something that I just wanted to just put on record.
Yeah, and I kind of share that curiosity. Do you know, Yuko, if they're the same owners?
Sure, Mr. Chair. I believe the other property might be is it 600 Princess? 630 Princess? Maybe
Is
I
it
just want to
the
confirm
foundry?
the
Was it the foundry building with the curb? Yeah, was it?
Oh.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. I can confirm that it was not the same owner at all. This particular owner has just acquired this property. And the context of this particular situation is that they acquired the property, and given that the building includes a number of affordable housing units, they were looking for some financial sort of contribution and support from CMHC. And through CMHC's review, they found that there was a zoning deficiency on the outside parking, and that's what's triggered the sort of the awareness that there was a deficiency. We explored the opportunity to establish an easement to secure those 19 offsite parking spaces, and were unable to do so, and that's triggered the need for the minor variance. The parking study did demonstrate that all of the parking requirements of the site can be met on site without putting pressure on public parking.
Good, thanks for that. And Megan?
Through the chair, if I may, just to provide some further clarification in regards to Mr. Leclerc's points. The application before us this evening is to recognize the existing condition of the site. So there are no parking spaces existing as of today that will be eliminated as a result of this application. The site is currently functioning with the 30 parking spaces that are available on site, as the parking spaces at 411 Macdonell were never established.
Good, well, that's important to know. James?
Thank you, and through you, Chair, just to Mr. Lightfoot's comments, and back up for a broader discussion about Williamsville itself. So we have established new parking regulations for Williamsville Main Street that require a minimum of 0.4 parking spaces per dwelling unit up to a maximum of 1. But the consideration in the official plan allows for parking reductions to that amount. And what we're seeing is a low parking uptake within this corridor itself. So a lot of the buildings that have been approved have been typically lower than what was required at 1 parking space per dwelling unit under the old regulations. And with the policies that and regulations that we've set up for Williamsville now, what we might actually see come through this committee in the future is large buildings coming through via a committee of adjustment process. So a 6 or 20-story building that would come to the committee of adjustment to seek minor variance to existing zone regulations, because that's really how we've established the new policies for the built form in Williamsville Main Street. So we might see applications in the future, just to give you a heads up, for things like parking reductions or density increases or setback reductions. But it is a kind of new, fun, and exciting time in the Williamsville Main Street corridor if we can actually bring a building about without a zoning bylaw amendment and can do it through a committee of adjustment process.
That's cool. Yeah, good to know. Thanks for that. Okay, any other questions, committee members? Okay, I'll open the public portion of the meeting. Is anybody with us to speak to the application for 720 Princess Street? And there's nobody here, so I'm going to close the public portion of the meeting, come back to the committee for a motion. So moved by Greg and seconded by Vincent. Any discussion? So all in favor, raise your physical hand, and that's unanimously carried. Thank you.
Thank you, and good evening.
Good evening. Okay, moving on the agenda, number 9, we have no motions, no notices of motions, no other business. There is no correspondence. The date of the next meeting is Monday, November 21st at 5:30, and so now we just need a motion to adjourn. So moved by Greg, seconded by Vincent. And all in favor, raise your physical hand, and that's unanimously carried. Meeting adjourned at 7:30 on the nose. Thanks, everybody. See you next month.